Okay guys, so now we're going to talk about the SN1 mechanism. Okay, so we're going to talk about the SN1 mechanism, and I want to get a few things clear about SN2 which I didn't say in the last video, so let me just go over it real quick. This was the reaction, right? Nu minus. We saw that this is going to attack from this side and give us the stereochemistry will invert Nu plus x minus, right? But so there are a few things I want to say here. First of which is this. So we said in the first video that ions have self-confidence issues, right? So you should ask me, well, Hari, I see that there's a free ion here, and we're considering a free ion here. Why is that? And that's a brilliant question. And the reason is that, see, we are not considered with, we are not concerned about the reaction as a whole because there's too many things going on. So basically, see, for example, we can just look at this reaction, okay? So this Nu minus actually came from an ionic compound, for example, something like say A and U, right? So for example, Nu minus could be like some Cl minus. So the compound it came from can be like NaCl, right? So when you put this in water, it has no other option but to dissociate, right? Because of the high dielectric constant of water and all those good stuff, this is going to dissociate. What it does after it dissociates is what we're talking about here, right? And in the whole reaction, Na plus will not play a humongous role, okay? But it will still play a small role. For example, let us say that the X here, right? For example, let's consider Nu minus is say bromine, okay? So that will not give us a coordinate compound. Okay, so that's here's what we're going to do. The positive charge on the positive charge, which is the counterpart of the nucleophile Nu minus, in some cases, right, when there's a coordinate bond formation is possible. For example, here I have what A plus and Nu minus, right? What could happen is that since nucleophile basically has lone pairs, right? So this A plus would actually coordinate with the X. So you remember it should be a coordinate bond like this, but I had plus charge here. Or you can always represent the coordinate bond as a covalent bond with a positive on the donor atom and a negative on the acceptor atom. Negative and a positive cancel, right? And this is what we call coordination, okay? And the good thing about this is that now an already negative electronegative element X is being stripped of more electrons, okay? So now he is really angry and really tugged on his electrons, which makes this bond further weaken. Okay, so that is one thing you want to remember, okay? But in this case, you can see that if you had Na plus is not going to go and coordinate with anything, right? But in the first mechanism, if you saw, we had something like an OH, right? And you had an H plus, and that was actually able to form this coordinate. Now, the good thing about this is two things, okay? One, as we said, this bond becomes much weaker. And the second thing is that this guy is what we call in the business as a nice molecule, right? So he has no self-confidence issues. He can leave whatever he wants to. It's great. So all he needs to do is just figure out how to get rid of this positive charge, and he's happy to go into the solution. So these are the two reasons why we try to, consider this extra coordination as a step. But generally, for a writing mechanism, it's not necessary, okay? So we forget about the A plus. And also, see this X minus is going to, see A plus is going to be in solution, right? So this X minus and A plus will become AX. So you can see that, you have one A and U here, and you have an A here, X minus and A plus and U, everything is balanced out, right? So this is the basis of redox reactions also, right? We say we are not concerned about what's going on with the spectator ions. We are going to look at only what's going on with the ions which are undergoing redox. For example, that's what we talked about in redox reactions, right? We only talked about ionic reactions. We said MnO4 minus plus 8H plus 5 electron. You guys remember this, right? Very important reaction. Mn2 plus 4H2O. If I remember correctly, I hope this is balanced. 2 4s are 8. You have 4 oxygens. 4 oxygens should be balanced. Yeah. So this is what we talked about, right? So but you should ask, well, Hari, MnO4 minus is never actually direct solution, and you're right. It comes as KMnO4. But what can I do? I can just add K plus on both sides and that'll be fine, right? So generally this will come with another reaction of a reducing agent. For example, you have electrons on this side, so you want to have Fe2 plus giving Fe3 plus electron, right? You write like this. So these are two different reactions, and then you multiply this with 5 to cancel out the electrons. This is what we call the ion-electron method of balancing redox reactions. Electrons are on this side, or the product side for this reaction. Electrons are on the reactant side for this reaction. This is basically MnO4 minus is an oxidizing agent, so it's getting reduced. Here Fe2 plus is getting oxidized, right? So they combine each other, and you can cancel the electrons and you get a reaction, but the electron reaction will be in terms of electrons only, right? Or in terms of ions only. So then what you do, you add up the charges. So you get an MnO4 minus in the end, and then you add K plus on both sides. You'll get a whatever Fe2 plus. You add chloride ions on both sides. You do that type of stuff, right? Let me just do real fast for you guys, so you guys can see what I'm talking about. In case you forgot about your redox. So if you just balance out this reaction, we have Fe2 plus on the reactant side also. I have Fe2 plus, giving. Let me just get some more chalk. 5 Fe3 plus Mn2 plus H4H2, right? And then what do we do? We say, okay, you have an MnO4 minus here, you cannot do that. So what do? You add K plus on both sides. So if you add K plus and MnO4 minus, this becomes KMnO4. But I need to add K plus on that side, so I'll add another K plus. Okay, it's still not over because now I have an Fe2 plus, so I need to figure out what to do with that. So, no, in fact, let's try to figure out what to do with this. This guy here. So, Fe3 plus, you have 5 of them. But you know that there's a nice compound called FeCl3, right? So for every Fe3 plus, you need 3 chlorides. So for 5 Fe3 pluses, you need 15 chlorides, right? So I'm going to add 15 chlorides on both sides. So you get 5 FeCl3, right? Chloride ions. So you get 5 FeCl3, you're adding 15 chlorides here, right? But you have 5 Fe2 plus, you only need 10 chlorides. Then you get 5 FeCl2, right? So FeCl2, 10 chlorides are gone, so I have 5 remaining, right? So now note that you have an Mn2 plus and a K plus here, and you have 8 H plus here, right? So now what I can do is, I can look at this and say, okay, maybe 5 Cl minus and 5 H plus will become HCl. So I can say 5 HCl, and I'll be left with 3 H plus, right? I had 8 H plus, so I'm left with 3 H plus. So I have 3 H plus on Mn2 plus and a K plus. You can see that I have 3 positive charges here and 3 positive charges here. So best thing I can do, I can just add 3 more chloride ions, for example. So in this side, if I add 3 more chloride ions, I get 3 more HCl. So this becomes, instead of 5 HCl, it becomes 8 HCl. You can forget about this. Similarly, if I add 3 more chlorines here, MnCl2, because this is 2 plus, we need 2 chlorines, right? So we'll take 2 chlorines, become MnCl2, and this becomes KCl. So you can see that all we were interested in the beginning was with the ionic reactions, okay, because that's what helps us. But in the end, you can never show an ionic reaction to somebody and say, carry out this reaction, right? So you go to the lab and you say, take 1 mole of KMnO4, 8 moles of HCl, and 5 moles of FeCl2, and you'll get these products. But you can see that the K plus and all didn't do much, right? They were there here, they were there, doesn't matter. But what actually made a difference was these 2 reactions. So that's what we're doing here also, okay? So I just wanted to make that clear for you guys, just in case. Kind of confuses us sometimes. Now, the second thing I wanted to discuss about is real quick is the inversion of stereochemistry concept, okay? So, this can be a little confusing. Now, when I say you started off with this type of a compound, right? And you end up with this type of a compound. First, there need not always be inversion in stereochemistry, okay? For example, if this guy is not even optically active, it's not going to matter. Let me give you an example. If I take methanol, okay, assume whatever happens, and whatever nucleophilic substitution happens, and let's say you are left with methyl chloride. There is no stereochemistry inversion here, right? Because this guy is optically inactive, this guy is optically inactive, right? You can see there's no chirality, 3 hydrogens there. That doesn't matter. What you are trying to understand from this is that you see, the reason we say stereochemical inversion is because of this. We're trying to make it very obvious to the readers that the attack is happening from the opposite side. Okay, because I can always see, we can always come up with examples where stereochemistry is not inverted. Let me think of one right now. So suppose you have, I hope you guys know the Fisher notation, right? If you have 1 carbon, these 2 bonds are like this, and these 2 bonds are inside. Okay, so that's the notation. So let's just say you have some random 4 stuff, right? Suppose you have an OH, let's say H here, OH, and some other random functional groups, right? So you need to make it chiral. So let's say some chlorine and or iodine or something. And let's say this OH minus gets replaced. Now let's look at the stereochemistry of this guy. First priority is obviously the iodine. Second priority goes to chlorine. Third priority goes to oxygen, right? And the least periodic group is on the vertical axis. You're going clockwise, right? So this is R, right? Now it depends on what I'm going to replace this with. Suppose I want to replace this OH. Suppose, okay, with something like this. So suppose this becomes replaced with fluorine instead. Okay, completely possible, except for, okay, so what will happen is when it's replaced, I told you guys, right? So it's going to flip this. So these two are going to get flipped. Okay, so in fact, that's the point of this, right? Because the fluoride or whatever is the nucleophile is going to attack from this side. So it is considered to be nucleophile, NU minus, or it will combine to NU. Iodine has come to this side. Agree? And you have chlorine and nitrogen, whatever they were, right? So this is good. But see, now here's the deal. Okay? This was R, so you cannot jump to the conclusion that this must be S because you do not know what NU minus is. For example, see, again in this case, hydrogen is the least priority anyways, so iodine comes first. Now, if the nucleophile has a priority which is more than chlorine but less than iodine, then this guy will have second priority, right? So this has second priority and this has third priority. Then you're still going clockwise. So this will still be R. So can any of you guys think of somebody who has a priority in between iodine and chlorine? It's easy, right? It's bromine. So for example, bromine, stereochemistry, when you're naming it, you'll see that bromine has intermediate priority between iodine and chlorine. So if bromine was the guy attacking, your stereochemistry is going to remain exactly the same, R. So I know in the previous video I said you start with R, you get S, you start with S, you get R. That's not completely true, okay? That's just to convince you guys of the fact that, you know, okay, so the nucleophiles are kind of the other side, okay? Keep that in mind. That is the most important concept. Otherwise, this is the exam. So I just wanted to make this very clear to you guys because I got super confused here. Because, you know, first it looks kind of obvious, right? Like, okay, so that acts the other side, so yeah, obviously, you know. But then you start thinking, okay, what if, it depends on this nucleophile, right? See, I can also show you a case where this becomes S. If this was, instead of chlorine, it was fluorine, right? Then this is the first priority, this is the second priority, this is the third priority. Then it's the other way around, so this will be an S compound, right? This will be an S compound. Okay, let me go get some chalk. So this will be an S, right? So you can see that there are cases of both inversion and retention configuration. So what I want to tell you guys is that when I say stereochemical inversion, it's not what it sounds like, okay? It's just to make sure this is clear. But in some books, they'll be very clear and they will say not stereochemical inversion, they will use the words, be very concentrate a lot here, okay? They will use the words inversion in configuration, okay? And this is important because this is true always. Because you can see these three bonds are facing this way, now they're facing that way. That is an inversion in configuration, right? Because this guy is variable, so forget about him. But if you look at what's constant with the molecule, is these guys, and they are inverted, right? So the configuration is inverted. That's great, but the stereochemistry need not be inverted. Okay, so it's sometimes, you know, sometimes people just use these words. They intercalated use these words configuration and stereochemistry. It's not exactly right. I just wanted to make this very clear for you guys, okay? So there's that. We did discuss a lot of heavy geometry and stuff suddenly, I agree. We discussed the Fischer projection. But these are all very important, guys, especially for those of you who want to write competitive entrances and stuff. Fischer projection, let me just go over it once more. It's one of the ways of representing 3D in 2D. So you consider that these two bonds are inside, okay? And these two bonds are like this, okay? So they're outside and these two bonds are inside. Just give a quick, you guys know all the ways of representing 3D in 2D. So one of them is the Fischer projection. Fischer, I think, or SNC will be interconverted, I don't know. Second one is wedge and dash. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of this. Oops, sorry about that. Wedge and dash is another important one. So if you represent the bond like this, right, it means it's outside the board. And if you represent it like this, it means it's inside the board, or one of the two, okay? So you generally can represent something like this. So say A, B, C, D, whatever. Because see, 3 points will always form a plane, right? That's a basic mathematical thing, right? You need three points or 3 constraints to get a plane. So any 3 of these guys, of these 5 guys, will always be on a plane. So you can always consider the central atom and 2 of the other guys are on the same plane. And this guy is outside, this guy is inside. So that's another way of doing. The third one is called Newman projections or sawhorse rotation. Sorry. So sawhorse rotation is useful when you have 2 carbons. For example, you draw them like this. Okay. So this is amazing. Okay, it gives you a clear view of everything which is going on. It's we will use this when you come to elimination and stuff. I'll teach you guys with this. So this is great, right? Because now you can see exactly what's going on. So there are 3 carbons like this and 3 carbons like that. So this is something which we call an eclipse conformation. Sorry. This is. This is eclipse. Sorry, everybody's anti is eclipse. If this turned around, right? Because this bond can freely spin, so you can also have this, right? This is what we call a staggered conformation and so on. So these are great ways and very fundamental things which people had to set before they went on for the organic chem. Very important. Remember this. Also remember, if you have your lowest priority group on the axial position, then if your priority order goes clockwise, it's R. If your priority order goes counterclockwise, it's S. So you want to remember that. That's stereochem. That's about it. Okay. So now let's actually get to what this video is about real quick, and that's SN1 mechanism, right? So. Or if we digress that, SN1 mechanism. Similarly, we start off with the same substrate. Okay, so we start off with this guy. Now see, a mechanism is basically your own way of convincing yourself as to why the reaction occurs. Okay, that's exactly what a mechanism is. But it should be backed by fact. So for example, people generally try to use if you're proposing a mechanism, right, you're going to have to prove that that's a mechanism. So you can do a lot of things. You can look at your mechanism and say, well, the reaction will be faster if I make suppose this product a lot more. So then what you do, you go to the lab, you'll add instead of 1 molar of this, you'll add 15 molar of this and time the reaction. And you'll say, oh, it's faster, okay, maybe I might be right. That's something you learn in kinetics, which is in the next video. Or you could do something like, okay, so the reaction has 2 steps, for example. Then you can prove that your mechanism is right if you can isolate the intermediate product, for example. So there is many tools which you use to convince the scientific community that, you know what, I'm right, this is a mechanism which is feasible, right? So you got to convince yourself, but scientifically with proof. So SN1, we'll show, okay, in the next video we'll show how kinetically we can prove all this. But for now, SN1, this is how we're going to convince ourselves, okay? So we're going to say, okay, in the previous video, SN2, what we did, we said nucleophile attacks on the opposite, stuff happens. Fine. Let's try to, think out of the box with this one. So, you told me that X is a nucleophile, right? We already agreed that X is a nucleophile. So what if X is such a good nucleophile, okay, that guy is just pulling the electrons like nobody's business. He is pulling these electrons a lot. Okay? So much so that a carbon just waves the white flag. Okay, he is done. So he says, you know what, have an electron, I'd rather, be a positive charge, a carbocation, than be with you, which is saying a lot. But still, so plus X minus, right? This is something we're going to look at. So I know I said ions have self-confidence issues. If you are jumping out of your seat right now, it's completely logical. But here's the deal. We are going to say this happens because X is a really, really good nucleophile. Real good nucleophile. Okay? So in chemistry, there are always exceptions. Okay? So we're going to have to deal with them. Now, turns out that carbocations do not have that much self-confidence issues. Okay? Because they can be stabilized. So if you have a lot of methyl groups here and stuff, right? They're going to pump electrons because of inductive effect, and this positive charge will be nullified a little bit. So it turns out that carbocations aren't that bad. So this is kind of positive, okay? And this is what we're going to call the rate determining step, which I will discuss in detail in the next video. But just remember this. So this is what's going to happen, okay? X minus is so pulling those electrons that carbon just gives up, waves a white flag, and says, you know what? Get away. And you get this positive charge. Then what happens? Then the nucleophile, see, a partial positive charge is not as good as a complete positive charge, right? In the previous, in SN1, what did we say? We said we had a delta plus here, a partial positive charge, and the nucleophile came. But you know that nucleophile is going to come much faster if you're going to have an actual positive charge, right? Because kq1 q2 by r square, acceleration, you can think of all that. It's not exactly how it works, but just to convince yourself, right? So more charge means more attraction, means faster. So he's going to run towards that guy. And now here's the deal. A carbocation is dash hybridized. So I'll give you 1 second to think about that. What is the hybridization of a carbocation? So 1 second is over. And if you guys said sp2, good job. Your 11th is kind of strong. sp2 hybridized are what? Carbocations. So they have 1p electron with no electron, right? Sorry, 1p subshell with no electron. So the consequence of sp2 is that they are planar, right? Trigonal planar. So 120, 120, 120. 120, 120 if all these are the same, all will be slight variations, whatever. The interesting thing, however, is that because this is planar, and remember we're talking about 3D space right now, okay? So there's a carbocation like this, and if I'm a nucleophile, I can attack from this way and move these guys like this. So let me show you this way. This is the carbon, okay? Carbon, 3 bonds. Nucleophile can attack from this side, by which case this will be pushed this way, or nucleophile can attack from this side and this will be pushed this way. So you can see that there are 2 cases which arise. So nucleophile on one side, nucleophile is Nu minus, right? Oops. So Nu and 3 carbons, or right? And again, we are not going to fall prey to the world and say this is going to be inversion in stereochemistry. We are going to be very specific and say this is inversion in configuration, but not always. So because you get a, see, in SN2 you had no choice because it's a 3D molecule, a rigid molecule, you only had one side to attack from because there was electron density which was repelling you, right? But now he's gone. He's gone, so you got a lot of space to work on this carbocation. You can attack from the front, from the back, it's all good, both are possible. Turns out, attacking from the opposite side is more possible because, see, this guy he is, but he's still close by, right? So he's still repelling a little bit. So nucleophile, at least for a while, will still like to attack from this side only. But that's fine, most of the people, neglect that. So, technically, the correct thing to say is that you are inverted 55% of the time. Because nucleophile doesn't want to go there for a little while. So you will be inverted 55% and you will not be inverted 45% of the time, or retention and configuration. But people just go, that's close enough to 50-50, okay? So this is what we call if there was, so you can see that since both are possible here, you will obviously, if this was optically active, right, for example R or S or whatever, you can only get 2 possibilities and both of them will be opposites, right? So you get one R and one S. Which one is R, which one is S, I can tell, because either depending on what the nucleophile is, the inverted could be the same, or the returning, or the same one, the one with the same configuration could be the same, right? So we don't know that. But all we can say is one is going to be R, the other is going to be S. We can say that for sure if this guy is optically active, right? In that case, this is what we call racemization. Okay, so that's the word. Then you get some more chalk. The word for this in the business is racemization. Okay, racemization, and the mixture of these is called a racemic mixture. Okay, so that's something you want to keep in mind. So that is basically our idea about life now. Okay, so you're saying, the SN2 mechanism didn't sound good, but this is plausible. And you can see that this is going to be very much plausible if this guy has a lot of methyl groups here. So suppose I have like 3 methyls, okay? If you propose SN2, I'd say, you're new to chem because of the fact that nucleophile cannot come here anymore because there are 3 methyls, okay? They are shielding this guy. Okay, shielding is means something else. So they are hindering the movement of the nucleophile towards the carbon, right? 3 methyls, they're rotating like this all the time, okay? There's no way the nucleophile can enter. But if suppose the carbon let go of these electrons, there are 3 methyls here. This is a beautiful tertiary carbocation. It's a tertiary butyl carbocation, right? And that is highly stabilized because, as you know, methyl has a plus I effect, right? So it's going to pump electrons this way. So the carbon who has no electrons is now getting electrons pumped into him. That's good. So you can see that this is the order of reactivity for SN1 mechanism. Now there is a slight catch here. I am only considering this reaction to talk to you about the conditions, right? To say if there are 3 methyls, we're only talking about this mechanism, right? This reaction. We're not talking about this nucleophile attacking, and there are 2 reasons for that. One is it's a very simple reaction, okay? It's just 2 charges coming together, not much drama there. Second is because this is what we call the rate determining step, and we will discuss rate determining step in the next video, okay? So wait for that. But anyways, you can see that tertiary greater than secondary greater than primary for this type of a reaction. Also, if the nucleophile was super big, then again, even if these are small, nucleophile is going to have a problem moving in, right? Because he's going to start heating his gas even before he gets in a comfortable distance to form a bond. So again, if the nucleophile is very big, the compound might resort to an SN1 mechanism. So now that you guys are good at this, let us go really quickly and summarize the difference. Sorry about that. And summarize the differences between SN1 and SN2. Real quick, okay? SN1, SN2. Now, again, if this question of why it's called SN1 and SN2 is pulsating, I understand, and we will discuss that in the next video too. We wanted to stand for something called the molecularity of a reaction. Okay, so we'll discuss that. But till now, we can say that SN1, you have racemization. Not always, you don't get perfect racemization, but we will just approximate 45 to 50. Right? Here you have inversion, not in stereochemistry, but you have inversion in configuration. Okay? So that's important. Okay? Second, SN1 will be preferred by a tertiary carbocation the most, followed by secondary. Primary is very least likely because the primary carbocation is least stable. SN2, exactly opposite, right? Because you want to keep the carbon as less hindered as possible. That's basically the two important differences of SN1 and SN2. That's basically it, guys. So I hope you guys understood the that exactly whatever I said in the last video is not completely correct, because I just wanted to push across the point that nucleophile attacks from the opposite side. We went over it very clearly right now as to why we cannot say inversion in stereochemistry, but we can only say inversion in configuration, right? So that's something very important. One more thing I wanted to say, see in that example, right? We did OH, H, Cl and I. And we said OH is getting replaced, right? But that's not always be true, because the weakest bond is this carbon-iodine bond, right? It's the biggest because iodine is the biggest. So technically iodine will be replaced. So let's actually do a real life example right now. Suppose iodine is replaced, nah? So now what will happen? It's gonna, see, nucleophile attack from here, right? So you're gonna get something like this. Nucleophile. OH will come to this side. Hydrogen and the chlorine, right? So this was what did we got? This was 1, 2, 3, right? So this was R. So you can see that chlorine has more priority than oxygen, right? So he's going to be more than this guy. So it's either going to be, if nucleophile is more priority than chlorine, then you're going to have something like this. If nucleophile has less priority than chlorine, it's going to be something like this. So you can just say nucleophile is some random nucleophile which has more priority than chlorine, it's going to work. Okay? But then you can argue how will that happen if iodine is here. So suppose you have, this is just a joke, but if you have aspartame, for example, which I know is radioactive and not as a, does not react and stuff. But I'm giving you an example here. Okay, I'm just showing you that it's not completely correct to say inversion in stereochemistry, but it is completely correct to say inversion in configuration. Okay, so that's just something we wanted to discuss. So hope you guys understood what was going on in this. Please watch this video again, very important. And the next one, I'll talk to you about some kinetics. Okay, take care, guys. See you.